Well, good evening, everyone. I guess it depends on where you are. It could be late afternoon for those watching us live. My name's Shawn Buckley with the Natural Health Product Protection Association, and we're very pleased. This is our first show on the Homeopathic Network, and we're having a focus on homeopathic doctors and practice. So I'm very pleased to have Victor Cirone with me and Basil, Ziv, and Elizabeth Chapman. And I'm going to kind of ask them to each introduce themselves in turn, explain how they got involved in the practice of homeopathic medicine, and then also to share, we're here because there's concerns, and that's why you're watching, and thank you for joining us, and please live stream, share the links, and then also we're going to be taking questions. So if you want to put questions in the chat, we'll try and get to those later and answer your questions. So if I can just, set the stage, because I have to, I didn't fully understand homeopathic medicine. And, I've dealt with homeopathic doctors over the years. I shared an office with a homeopathic doctor that became a lawyer and wanted to learn the ropes of kind of practicing law against Health Canada. But I got a different feel for it when we had this health charter tour last year. And for those of you who aren't aware, NHPPA, so Natural Product Protection Association, we drove the charter petition across the country to deliver it on Parliament on October 23rd. But for 3 weeks, we broadcast a health show. And we pre-recorded the ones that would play during the day, and then we would have live events at night because we couldn't manage that when we were on the road. And I interviewed several medical doctors, two of which became homeopathic doctors. And now both of these medical doctors practiced for at least 40 years. One, Stephen Malthouse, some of you know him well, and some of you on this call know him well. And he had shared with me, and I asked the question, the video is on our site. You can go to the health tour and watch the video. Do you get better outcomes with, allopathics or mainstream medicine, because he was a medical doctor and a homeopathic doctor, or, with homeopathy? And the clear answer was, you get those major turnarounds with homeopathy that you just don't experience as a medical doctor. Well, another medical doctor that became a homeopathic doctor was Dr. Michelle Perro, who is a emergency room pediatric doctor. And again, she's still practicing, and she's practiced for over 40 years. And her husband is a pediatric emergency doctor. So we had two, pediatric experts. And she explains, well, they came across, homeopathy because their son was suffering from reoccurring croup, and it wouldn't stop. And here we've got two pediatric doctors that didn't want to use the medical treatment. So they didn't want to use high dose antibiotics for long periods of time to try and solve this because they were aware of the side effects. So they decided to try a homeopathic remedy. And as she describes, and you can go watch the video, it's like a light switch went off, like just bang, it was gone. And that this was repeatable. And she shared other examples from her own family. She felt safe doing that as opposed to speaking about patients. But she was clear, that she sees way better outcomes and immediate turnarounds with homeopathic medicine. Well, that's, to me, I'm just saying, I found that interesting, that here I had two long-term medical doctors. They didn't give up their medical license. They practiced both, sharing that they were having better and more dramatic patient outcomes with homeopathic practice. So, I just felt that was important to preface. And then if there is a tradition out there that it seems the mainstream media wants to attack, it's homeopathic medicine. And that in itself validates it in my mind, because I've been practicing law in this area since 1994. I've, I've gone against Health Canada in court more than probably all other Canadian lawyers combined, is when they press charges. And, spent at least half of my practice dealing with them. Most of the time, there aren't charges, and you're just trying to get them to be reasonable or navigating as they try to destroy practitioners and manufacturers, usually for telling the truth. Not because, it doesn't matter. They can be saving lives. They can be reducing suffering. But if they tell the truth, that is a huge problem and they need to be attacked. But I used to joke that if Health Canada was attacking a remedy, that you better write down what it is in case you get what it is, because they seem to only attack stuff that worked. Like I was always in court, defending charges on products that literally were saving lives, and sometimes the courts would make findings of fact that Health Canada caused lives, by restricting access. So when homeopathy is under attack in the mainstream media, then I know. And it's funny. It had nothing to do with this call. I took 2 homeopathic remedies this morning. Not even aware that in my mind when I decided to take them, that we were on this call tonight. So so I'm clearly a believer. And with that kind of preface, Victor, do you want to share with us, who you are, how you got into the practice of homeopathic medicine, and then some of the issues that homeopathic doctors are facing?
Sure, I'd be happy to. First of all, thank you so much for having us. We're discussing very important issues tonight that we've been navigating for a number of years now. So my name is Victor. I'm a practicing homeopath in Ontario. My background is that I was practicing herbal medicine for many years, and I felt like there was something lacking in my practice. And through a chance encounter with poison ivy, actually, and a miraculous cure from taking homeopathic medicine, I recognized that there was something here, something there in homeopathy that needed to be explored. And as I started to explore homeopathy more and more, I understood that Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathic medicine, that his elaboration of the law of similars, which is the basis, the practical and philosophical basis of homeopathic medicine, was actually a singular and unique revelation in the history of ideas. And what it serves to do is to liberate medical thought and science from the confines of reductionism and materialism. And what homeopathy opens up is a striking paradigm for understanding the nature of health and disease. And once I began to explore and understand the beauty and sophistication of homeopathy, not just on the theoretical level, but also on the level of results, I decided to devote the rest of my life to practicing this system of medicine. It's that powerful and that beautiful and that profound. It never gets boring. There's always more to learn. And so the reason that we're here tonight is because we have been facing ongoing challenges when it comes to the importation of remedies into Canada. Now, one thing to establish is that there are many thousands of remedies and new remedies that are continually being introduced. Many of these remedies are, for various reasons, not produced in Canada and have to be imported. So we have in homeopathy a very high degree of individualization when it comes to prescribing. And so as a homeopath, you may encounter a patient who needs a remedy that you will prescribe once in your practice and may never need to prescribe again. This in and of itself differentiates, I think, homeopathy from most other systems of medical practice because we're dealing with 9,000 plus remedies and prescribing them according to the law of similars and prescribing them according to the totality of symptoms for the patient in front of us. We prescribe for the patient, not for the disease. And so that means a very, very high degree of specification in terms of prescribing and individualization. And so even when it comes to understanding the homeopathic materia medica, it's very vast and can't be interpreted and understood in the same way as you can other materia medicas from other systems of medicine. And so naturally, the importation of remedies is very important. Not only the importation of remedies, but patients being able to receive remedies in a timely manner. Because you have patients who need remedies quickly to address the chronic diseases that they're coming for treatment for. And so it's simply not acceptable for patients to have to wait many weeks or even months for a remedy. It just doesn't serve them. It doesn't serve the practice. Unfortunately, over the last several years, that's precisely the problem that we've been facing throughout Canada, where packages are being seized, packages are being refused entry into the country, and patients sometimes are having to wait weeks or months to receive medicines that they need now. And so we have been in continual dialogue with Health Canada about this issue, trying to understand why this is happening and how to stop it. Unfortunately, we haven't really made much progress despite our efforts, despite many meetings with people from Health Canada explaining in detail what a homeopathic remedy is, how a homeopathic remedy needs to be differentiated from a crude herb or from a naturopathic supplement or any number of other supplements that might be brought into the country. Despite our efforts and the hours and hours and hours of time that we've put into elaborating these details and these nuances and how homeopathic remedies need to be understood in a different way than other natural health products, we are being completely ignored. Our concerns have been simply dismissed. And there are a number of challenges that we've come up against. And one of the challenges is explaining also the importance of compounding and how our compounding rights have to be respected. And unfortunately, what we're seeing now is that practitioners are increasingly being asked to prove that imported remedies are genuinely being used for individualized patient care and not functioning as part of an unlicensed commercial supply chain. When you look at the nature of homeopathic practice and how, for example, as I mentioned, a practitioner may need to bring in a remedy, highly obscure remedy that cannot be sourced anywhere else except for one pharmacy somewhere in Europe or somewhere in the United States, that this remedy is not being used for commercial sale. We're not selling commercial products, and our compounding rights are being threatened, and this is a big problem. So the model that homeopathy operates with is very different than the standard model that Health Canada is using for understanding natural health products. And the regulatory framework, as I understand it, is designed around mass-produced products with fixed ingredients, fixed indications, and standardized dosing. And with homeopathy, that the individualization that's a part of this, it's a completely different paradigm. Yeah, and remedies are selected based on a totality of symptoms. Dosages are also highly individualized, and remedies are compounded by practitioners by necessity. And so this distinction between raw material and finished product in the new policy changes that Health Canada are laying out, it really jeopardizes our ability to continue to compound into the future. And the new policy basically is stating that a remedy may be considered either a raw material or a finished natural health product, depending on factors such as its form, labeling for intended use, and who receives it. And we're basically in a position now where there's significant uncertainty regarding these matters. And so a remedy that a practitioner considers a raw material for compounding may be viewed by regulators as a finished product that's ready for consumption. And because there's no clear line, classification may vary from one case to the next, which means inconsistencies when it comes to border enforcement. And so the amount of discretion that's now being built into the system is a big problem. And it's going to mean more packages are going to be held up. Remedies are not going to be allowed into the country. And it's going to be, in a sense, left up to chance whether a shipment is admissible based on packaging, based on the supplier, based on website information, and based on so-called intended use. And all of these points are simply ignoring all of the issues that we've been bringing up in terms of really trying to emphasize to Health Canada why homeopathic remedies need to be understood on their own terms, and we're simply not being listened to.
So perhaps I can jump in.
Yeah, please do, Basil. And so also introduce who you are,
yeah,
and how you got into the practice and some of the issues.
Okay, so my name is Basil. I'm the Registrar and CEO of the College of Homeopaths of Ontario. So this is a college that is regulating the profession of homeopathy. So homeopaths are regulated under the Regulated Health Professions Act and also the Homeopathy Act. So I bring a slightly different perspective, although I endorse everything that Victor had to say about the and in the way that he introduced the problem. The only thing that I also want to mention, Shawn, that you talked about homeopathic doctors. Well, in Ontario, the profession of homeopathy does not have that right to call themselves a doctor because it's not in the legislation. So, but there's a bit of an anomaly because I'm sure that there are some doctors who practice homeopathy, but not in Ontario at this point in time. So, just to give you a little bit of my background, I became a homeopath. Now I'm thinking back about 40 or 45 years ago. At that time, homeopathy was not regulated, and at the time that I that I became a homeopath, there weren't any homeopathic schools actually at that time. So my teachers, in a way, were the history, the old homeopaths, their literature, and but over time, of course, I did attend some homeopathic educational institutions, and so it was an evolution in my case of how I became a homeopath. But in 2009, in Ontario, the Transitional Council of the College of Homeopaths was formed, and I became the registrar. So that's the background. And in 2015, the college was formed. So, I just want to bring a little perspective. I know that in the rest of the provinces, homeopathy is not regulated, but from an Ontario perspective, the purpose of regulation is about public protection. It's also about ensuring that the public have access to well-qualified, competent, ethical homeopaths. But I think the concept of public protection should apply to the entire country. I think every province wants to see professionals who are practicing in the public interest. But in this particular instance, where we're confronted with Health Canada and the regulations surrounding raw materials and compounding and natural health products, this does affect the practice of homeopaths in Ontario, and as it does throughout the country. And we're particularly disturbed in that homeopaths may not have access to remedies that they need for their patients. When homeopaths are practicing, they establish a relationship with their patients. So whatever remedies they're prescribing, it's within that relationship. It's in the interest of the patient to be able to receive those remedies timeously. And this can be problematic if the patients are not receiving the remedies, and it could have a grave impact in terms of the health of the patients.
Basil,
So,
can I follow up on that, and also, Victor and Elizabeth? Like, my understanding is that homeopathic remedies are so safe that it's crazy, and it's in part because the practice of homeopathy uses such diluted remedies by and large that, I mean, I'm willing to venture there's not a recorded death ever in in the world history. From a homeopathic remedy? Am I right on that?
I've never heard of anybody being hurt by a homeopathic remedy. I'm
Right.
sure you're aware. I could just say one thing, that homeopathic remedies are extremely diluted. And just to give you an idea of how they're made, very simply, if you were using the centesimal potency, if you took one drop of a particular plant, for example, let's say take pulsatilla, if you squashed it up and you got a juice, if you took one drop of that juice and you mix it with 99 drops of alcohol and water and you shook it up vigorously 100 times, that would produce a C1 solution. So the dilution would be 1 in 100. If you then took one drop of the C1 and you mixed that with another 99 drops of alcohol and water and you shook that up vigorously, that would produce a C2 solution. But the dilution has gone up from 1 in 100 to 1 in 1,000. If you keep doing that, C2, C3, C4, by the time you get to C12, there are none of the original molecules contained within the solution. So how could that have any impact in terms of even with poisonous substances? If there are no molecules contained within the solution, how could they harm the patient? It's another process, a completely different process. It's an energetic process that is in fact appealing to the vital force of that individual, to the immune system of the patient. That's what is catalyzing the patient into a point into a recovery. That's the remedy is acting on in an immaterial way. I hope that gives you some idea.
On safety, that is a crucial point. Is, we're all when Health Canada is stopping shipments at the border, that trained, I'm going to call them doctors. I'm sorry, because I know that homeopathic doctors are on average more trained than the medical doctors. And I don't want to play that, mainstream game. So when homeopathic doctors are making treatment decisions for patients, in my mind, it is dangerous to interfere with that. There's no safety concern. It's not like you're importing something that's going to cause harm, but it causes benefit. And Health Canada refuses to recognize the benefit. Like, they've got this philosophical issue. It's all about safety, but it's not safe to interfere with a doctor-patient relationship that's ongoing and the patient is engaged in, and that's been helping the patient. See, that's where I find the whole thing reckless. We're not talking about people importing, a spice rack from Amazon. We're talking about either a patient or a doctor importing the treatment that they need for their health.
So
and
Health
Canada doesn't have any way to evaluate when they seize a parcel. I mean, what are they going to do with it? Like, they're not doing toxicology studies on the substances, and if they did, they wouldn't find anything. So it's absurd for them to seize parcels and to be somehow regulating that.
I just want to add one thing. Almost every patient homeopath relationship, they use a patient intake form, so they get an idea of what the nature of the problem is. But this is followed up with an informed consent, so that the patient has a clear understanding about the way the homeopaths are working, and have their questions answered right up front. So I just want to make this clear, that this whole process of homeopath and patient relationship certainly within a regulated environment is reinforced. There's an ethical consideration, and then of course there's the practical application, the way the homeopaths work. I don't see, if Health Canada are worried about the way that homeopaths are treating patients, then they should be happy with regulation. Because
but it's also, I mean, that's a provincial jurisdiction, the regulation of practitioners. Like, getting on what Liz was saying, as a lawyer, I've interacted with Health Canada a number of times when shipments are seized, not just for homeopathic doctors, but also for Chinese traditional practitioners. And it never has anything to do with what does the patient need it. Like, they had this policy document, and then somebody internally wrote, a letter which became their policy. And it's all just about policy. It has nothing to do with the end user, and it's frustrating. So let's say, you want to import something that's now like off of homeopathy, but onto, traditional Chinese practitioners. Well, let's say, the active, and let's say a herb has been concentrated, so it's now an extract. Well, is that for compounding or not? Are you not allowed? What if it's dried and now it's a crystal? So, like, what does that have to do with whether it's compounding or not? And now they're talking about, well, if it's, it's a finished product, we're in trouble. You mean it makes no sense to me.
The other consideration is the safety. I think, if you look at what homeopaths are doing, and as I think it was mentioned earlier, I don't think I've never heard of a patient being harmed by taking a homeopathic remedy.
But
yeah, in France, the pharmacists in France, 94% of them recommend homeopathic medicines for pregnant women. So, I mean, that should tell us, right? The safety profile is robust.
So just wait, 94% of French medical physicians, pharmacists will recommend homeopathic medicines for, pregnant women.
Yeah.
So that speaks volumes about safety, doesn't it? Because that's the group you have to be very careful about.
Well, these days it seems like that's so many procedures being offered to pregnant women, but nevertheless, in the past,
about a different paradigm that's more accepted there. Can I share? Years ago, I was driving up to Williams Lake to go to court, and in the middle of the night, and I'm listening to CBC, and they've got a documentary on about the 1918 Spanish flu. And back then in North America, there were homeopathic hospitals and there were allopathic, the mainstream hospitals. Well, a viral, even though antibiotics they don't work on viruses. Well, if you got the Spanish flu and you were sick enough that you had to go to a hospital, if you went to an allopathic hospital, CBC was reporting you had an 80% chance of dying. But if you went to a homeopathic hospital, you had an 80% chance of living. Like, it was absolutely reversed. And I remember thinking, man, if there's ever a viral pandemic and I need to go to the hospital, I want to go to a homeopathic hospital, except we got rid of the homeopathic hospitals. And we didn't get rid of them because patients didn't want to access the practice of homeopathic medicine. So I think for those viewers in North America, you have to appreciate, in Europe, like France, when 94% of pharmacists will basically use, recommend homeopathic remedies for pregnant women. Well, our culture really doesn't understand homeopathic medicine in the same way that other cultures do. And other cultures privilege it in a way that we could only dream of. And here we've got Health Canada interfering with patients' rights to be treated with homeopathic medicine, even though the practice is legal.
The irony, back in the 1800s, mid 1800s, almost Well, all of the homeopaths were actually medical doctors. In fact, I'm trying to remember the dates, but I think it was 1859, somewhere around there. Almost all, well, almost, not almost, all of the homeopathic doctors were in fact also medical doctors. And then I think, if you think back, I think it was the Flexner report.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to think exactly when that was. Also, maybe 1859 or somewhere around there.
1917.
Yeah, it was during at the end of the First World War.
So with the Flexner report, you had, I think, Rockefeller and Carnegie, who were involved. Well, I know Rockefeller was involved in the oil industry, and Carnegie also very powerful financier. And I think what happened is that they found a way to create synthetic products from some of the natural products that were used in order to treat patients. And by creating synthetic products from the petroleum industry, they were able to trademark these medicines. And by trademarking them, they basically managed to control and the through the pharmaceutical industry, in fact, developed from that point. And so it also, and I think the Flexner report speaks to this. I think that what happened is that the educational system was then transformed to use these trademark products, and by doing this, the natural approach, the naturopaths, the homeopaths, and perhaps anybody else outside of the formal pharmaceutical approach was basically eliminated.
It's more than that, Basil. So they actually made it illegal. So you're describing how basically what every doctor it was a homeopath. Like, so our medical doctors were homeopaths. We had true integrative medicine, because they also would have been practicing some herbal medicine at the same time. So we had integrative medical practice where they were also choosing to use homeopathic medicine because they wanted to use whatever worked. Like, that speaks volumes in itself. But what happened, Basil, is after the Flexner report, my understanding is every state in the US except one, and every province in Canada passed legislations that gave medical doctors basically a medical monopoly. And in some provinces, there's still a medical monopoly. So every province has an act establishing the College of Physicians and Surgeons and defining medicine and saying only doctors can practice medicine. And then, so in Ontario, there will be that act. But now, because there's an act governing the practice of homeopathic medicine, you guys are allowed within a certain defined scope of practice. But curiously, as you point out, you're not allowed to call yourself a doctor. Only the members of the College of Physicians and Surgeons. Right now in Quebec, a naturopathic doctor, Annie Janot, is waiting to be sentenced for practicing medicine, for practicing as a naturopath. And the issue wasn't, is she saving lives? Like, are there people in Quebec who are only alive today because of her? Are there people in Quebec that, would be crippled and disabled but for her? That's not the issue. Is she a medical doctor? And she isn't. She's been convicted and she's waiting sentencing. So it's deeper than that, Basil. As Rockefeller and Carnegie and whoever else was involved convinced the governments to basically make it illegal to practice other traditions. I mean, I'm in my 7th decade. I bet you it wasn't until I was in my 30s that I even heard of a homeopathic doctor or homeopathy or a naturopathic doctor, because we didn't have them.
Well, and Rockefeller had a homeopath as his private physician, just saying. So
Yeah,
he
he did.
wanted it for himself. He just didn't want everyone else.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Rockefeller lived till 97 and he relied on homeopathic physicians for the last 50 years of his life. So it wasn't just a passing interest.
But it was a brilliant business model. That's what it was. And in fact, it not only affected the professionals, it affected the educational institutions and
Mhm.
the hospitals. So you had at that time, in the beginning, I think in the early 1900s and in the late 1800s, there were a significant number of homeopathic hospitals, but these basically got wiped out.
Mhm. No.
And
Oh,
there's
sorry.
just one other point is that the educational institutions funding for those institutions basically that were using the non pharmaceutical model were basically wiped out.
Mhm. Well, and it's functionally illegal, and we'll get to you in a minute, Elizabeth. I just realized, we're not, but for drug licensing. So here, what we do is we make it so that it is illegal to use a drug, anything for therapeutic purpose. I mean, so a drug is anything that you would use to prevent illness or to address illness once it's manifest. So even essential nutrients that you need to avoid illness, thiamine, vitamin C. Well, these are classed as drugs. To me, that's just criminal that we need the government's approval to be able to take things that are essential for life. Like, how does that happen? But that's the world we're in. And then, obviously the chemicals or anything else are treated as drugs, but they've made the drug approval process so expensive that only drugs that have this patent, or you refer to it as trademark, Basil, in the lifetime of everyone on this call, every single drug in Canada approved for a serious health condition, with the exception of Premarin, had a patent. And that's by design. It means that it's only legal to treat serious health conditions with either surgery or chemical drugs.
Yeah,
That's
and what we
scary.
can say also concerning the nature of homeopathic remedies is that actually they're the most ecologically sustainable system of producing medicine that you could ever conceive of. So once a remedy is made one time, it will never have to be manufactured and produced again. It can be replicated over and over and over and over and over again. And so, when we're living in an era of antibiotic resistant bacteria, where we have increasingly treatment resistant strains that are affecting the population, when we have tons of SSRIs that are being pumped into the environment, and people are not realizing that, countless millions of pounds of over 50 pharmaceutical forms of SSRIs have made their way into all of the wastewater systems of every industrial nation in the world. And so, from the perspective of planetary ecology, when these substances are introduced into a given ecosystem, the inhibitors of various plant and animal species have been shown to alter their function. Every biological system that serotonin affects. So we're dealing with significant impacts on sexual maturation, reproduction, germination, root and brain development of various plant and animal species. And so were homeopathic medicines were to be more widely adopted and accepted, this would significantly offset the overprescription of pharmaceutical drugs and help to remediate the dire ecological consequences and public health consequences of the misuse of pharmaceutical drugs.
Mhm.
Not to mention that, there is an emerging field of agri-homeopathy where homeopathic remedies are being used for agricultural purposes as well as potentially ecological remediation. So there's huge potential
Huge
for
potential.
homeopathy outside of even just treating individual human beings, but for agriculture and for ecosystem remediation. Not only the fact that homeopathic remedies themselves will not cause any ecological catastrophes, which pharmaceutical drugs have undeniably done and are continuing to do at alarming rates.
Well, likely everyone watching this call has pharmaceuticals in them from their water and food.
Yes.
I mean, it's so pervasive. Elizabeth, can we get to you? I'll pull you up. I'll pull you up on the big screen here.
Okay.
Can we get to you, and can you introduce yourself and how you got into homeopathy? And then, maybe we'll segue back to the challenges that are immediately being faced.
Sure. Thanks, Shawn. My name's Elizabeth Chapman, and I got into homeopathy actually as a child. My parents used homeopathy when I was growing up, and so I was very fortunate to have a lot of natural approaches. I also had my share of antibiotics, but anyway, when I got into my 20s, I rediscovered homeopathy and decided to train, and went down to Australia and trained as a naturopath there, specializing in homeopathy. I'm no longer in practice, but I am very involved as a volunteer director with Canadians for Homeopathy. And what we've just been talking about is so important because, the homeopathy legacy in Canada has been forgotten. It's being wiped off the planet. It's just, we had such a vibrant homeopathic, like you said, hospitals and teaching colleges and practitioners in Canada, and people don't even know that anymore. So Canadians for Homeopathy was formed in 2017 with the idea of giving a voice to consumers of homeopathy. And that's why we're so excited to partner with the Natural Health Products Protection Association, because, we want to amplify your message and also piggyback on your work that you're doing to raise awareness about homeopathy and get consumers up to date on some of these issues, because we are really in danger of losing access to our remedies. And homeopathy, when the Flexner report and all those things happened, it almost died out. I mean, I believe that was the intention, but I mean, it didn't die out because it works, but also because it's the people's medicine, and the moms and the families kept using homeopathy. People had their own kits at home. Mm-hmm. And that is another part of the safety aspect, that although we wouldn't anywhere recommend people treat a serious chronic illness themselves, for acute self-limiting problems, people can use homeopathy safely for themselves and their family. And that's what Canadians for Homeopathy is about. Is we put on educational webinars to help people learn how to use the remedies. And we also educate people on, when is the time you actually need to consult a homeopath, because that's also very important. And so, the consumer voice can support the practitioners in some of these issues. Yes, a consumer might say, well, I don't import remedies, so what does it matter to me? No, it matters for everyone, because if the practitioners are hamstrung and they're not able to get the remedies, then eventually it's going to be problematic for everyone. And thank you.
I think we, so first of all, Health Canada, and it was you guys that brought this to my attention, that Health Canada's asking for comments on their new policy on compounding. And July 10th is the deadline for that. Now, you might think, oh, well, if I'm not importing or I don't know these things, that maybe I shouldn't do a comment. But I actually think if you're a consumer and you've benefited from the practice of homeopathic medicine or traditional Chinese medicine, that you should be writing and saying you actually should be butting out Health Canada because you're interfering with the doctor-patient relationship. And when my doctor wants to compound for me or have me import something, or import something for me, you need to butt out. Because if they don't get that feedback, they don't have it. And then we don't know who's on this call, but we're hoping some homeopathic doctors are on this call. I wanted to raise some other issues that almost no homeopathic doctor is aware of. And that's, Health Canada's self-care framework, which, we came very close almost exactly a year ago to basically homeopathic practice being ended, like completely ended, no return for you. yeah, you can still practice, but you'll have 0 remedies. And most homeopathic doctors have no idea that, you know, their practice was in jeopardy because it's just the word isn't out there. So I'll just, you know, speak broadly about this framework, but we've got a discussion paper on our site about it. And, you know, there's information out there. But Health Canada has been, for as long as I've been involved, so I'm working on my 33rd year here of practicing in the regulation of natural health products, long before we have had natural health product regulations, which are awful, but that's a different topic. So, you know, but they're the mischief here on the importing. They're the mischief here on the importing it because the definition of manufacturer in the regulations exempts practitioners of the compound from having to meet any manufacturing requirements. So, yeah, so they are the mischief. But in any event, the point I was trying to make is as long as I've been involved, and I started as counsel for Health Canada, I started on the other side. As long as I've been involved, it's been clear to me that Health Canada has wanted to get rid of the practice of natural medicine and certainly the practice of homeopathic medicine. It's crystal clear. So even bringing in the drug style regulations that came into force in 2004, that was an attempt to get rid of the industry. I mean, in the United States, the same products are treated as foods, and by law, they're deemed to be safe. And the law passing that puts an obligation on the government to protect and promote the access in the United States, where we do the opposite. They're outlawed as drugs, and Health Canada does everything to restrict them. And clearly, the purpose of those regulations and that's the way it was at the beginning. They were so strict, no one was getting approved. The purpose of those regulations was to get rid of the practice of natural medicine. But the consumer put so much pressure on Health Canada that here we are. We have the practice of natural medicine. We have natural health products, although they're way more expensive. A lot of the really important ones are gone, and they're dumbed down. Like, they've lost ingredients and they've been forced to go with less ingredients. They're less effective. But that wasn't enough because we still have a vibrant natural health industry. So Health Canada came out with what was called the self-care framework. And they said, we're going to phase this in. And the marketing was just wonderful. And, you know, it's kind of hard to argue with the marketing, except that it will cost lives and lock us into a chemical pharmaceutical prison. But the marketing is look at, you've got a headache and you go to the pharmacy and they've got pain relievers there. And well, you've got aspirin, you know, ASA, you've got Tylenol, you have white willow bark. Oh, well, the consumer's going to think, can you guys mute? Just, we're getting a little bit of back noise. The consumer's going to think that they're all regulated the same, but they're not regulated the same. The white willow bark isn't regulated, or the other natural remedies are not regulated according to Health Canada as strictly. So that's unfair to the consumer. And so let's harmonize fully. And they actually have a staged plan to harmonize fully. So step one was to impose the same penalties and regulatory powers that the most dangerous chemicals are subject to. So, you know, your Vioxxes and your thalidomide. So let's make sure that homeopathic remedies that have never harmed anyone, and vitamin C and, you know, thalamin, essential nutrients, are subject to those same penalties and powers as the most dangerous class of chemical drugs. That was step one. Step three was cost recovery, where basically manufacturers for every single drug were going to have to pay a yearly licensing fee, different fees for buildings. Well, help me out. Like, how many remedies do homeopathic doctors need to have a reasonable practice?
Oh,
Depends who
thousands,
you
probably.
ask.
Yeah.
Depends who you ask and depends on the style of practice. There are some practitioners that are content with using a few hundred remedies, but there are others who use many thousands of potential
Mhm.
remedies.
Yeah. The
And
point
each of
I'm
those
making
remedies
is,
comes in several potencies. So
the point I'm making is that it's so many that the distributors, few as they are, would be out of business the first year these regulations the cost recovery came into force. Now, this is how close we were to the cost recovery coming into force. So you impose regulations in Canada by publishing them in the Canada newspaper called Gazette One. And then you wait a period of time for people to comment. And then you publish them again. You may amend them based on those comments, and you publish them again in Gazette 2 and their law. Well, the Health Canada published them in Gazette 1. And there was a lot of feedback. Like, we're going to go out of business. Like, TCMs and homeopathic doctors were going to be out of business. And Health Canada said, we're pressing ahead. We were expecting exactly a year ago for them to be gazetted again. And because we have a minority government, or now a slight majority, it's too political. The government does not want a rebellion over homeopathic medicine and traditional Chinese practitioners. So Health Canada's waiting. But they're like, the Chinese Communist Party. They plan in hundreds of years. So they're just waiting until there's a political majority. I mean, they were public last year. We're going ahead. This is going ahead. So, we'll put some, a cap for TCM, the TCM providers and the homeopaths, but those providers still were worried, and the intention is to get rid of the practice. And then the next part of the self-care framework was full harmonization with the drug model. So listen to me, homeopathic doctors. So once they finish this and there's full harmonization, a homeopathic remedy, they'll all have to be approved again. They have to be approved with the same standards of evidence, meaning clinical trials, as the chemical drugs. Full harmonization, right? If it's going to be on the shelf, listen carefully also. To use this self-care framework to get licensing, no traditional use evidence for efficacy. And you can't get licensed for anything, any condition that is not self-limiting. So if it's going to resolve within 60 days, it's got to be self-limiting, and it can't be for a condition for which you would seek the advice of a healthcare practitioner, meaning you. So for that, you have to go through the new drug approval process, C.08.001 of the drug regulations, which costs $1 billion, and only chemical pharmaceutical drugs with a patent have ever been approved, except with Premarin, made from horse urine of pregnant horses, very expensive to make. So, yeah. So, I mean, the published goal of Health Canada is to get rid of you. And that's why we have this call, because we've got these 3 homeopathic practitioners that want you to unite together, that want you to start, first of all, educating yourself that the government wants to get rid of you, and they're close. You've got to be aware, you've got to be plugged into their network, and you need to start taking action, because you're going to be saved by your clients being educated and being a political voice against Health Canada. And so the purpose of this call, and we're hoping everyone watching this call, and we're going to have way more on the rebroadcast, and once it's posted online, send it to your homeopathic doctors and say, I want you to watch this, and I want you to plug in, and I want you to listen, because you don't understand how your practice is threatened. I'm going to stop now and let the 3 of you jump in.
So I just want to reiterate the points that I made earlier about the regulation of homeopathy in Ontario. I know that this doesn't apply in the other provinces, but certainly homeopathy in Ontario cannot be considered to be anything but safe. We have a college. We have standards, we have guidelines, we have the legislation behind us. If homeopathic remedies are safe, The only issue can be ethical, and that's the whole reason why we have the college, is to ensure that homeopaths are well trained, they're well educated, they practice according to the standards and guidelines. There can be no reason why these remedies should not be available to homeopaths, and certainly to homeopaths in the other provinces as well.
And I'll just say that, if you're a homeopath, please make use of your patients, your public, us consumers. We want to support you and make sure that you can continue doing what you're doing. So, Canadians for Homeopathy, like I said, we're partnering with the NHPPA. We have a Take Action page on our website. We'll be linking up with the NHPPA Homeopathy website, so that we can start putting out actions that people can do to protect homeopathy. And if you're a consumer of homeopathy, please join us. We want to be the voice of homeopathy in Canada, and get involved with Canadians for Homeopathy and the NHPPA.
Right. So it's essential that practitioners plug in.
Yeah.
So they know what's going on. And then, Jason, can you pull up for us, and we'll just maybe walk through the practitioner page, and the materials will change from time to time and be updated, but just the type of thing that Elizabeth is talking about. So, what we've done here is so there's resources that you can download. So,
you guys have such an incredible array of resources.
Yeah. So there's like different postcards. There's that one up there. We'll switch that out with a different one very shortly. There's other ones at the bottom, but those are things. The idea is that, well, you're a practitioner, you've got a waiting room. So as different issues come up, as long as you're plugged into groups that are educating you, they'll have material. So they'll have posters for you. You can have a poster up. If there's a petition, you can have, it on your thing. You can have materials for your patients to get educated so that they can plug in, and it's very little work for you. So that's the thing is first of all, you need to be plugged in with other homeopathic doctors so that you're educated about what's going on. And two, you need to get involved in getting, Canadians to understand that their ability to access you and access the remedies that they rely on are being threatened. And unless they're educated, they can't plug into groups like the NHPPA to take action, because that's where we really shine, is getting people to put pressure on Health Canada and the politicians to take action. So, okay, so Jason, yeah, so that's, the point we're just trying to make is this is just a page for practitioners to be able to very easily, like, you could be on this page for 20 minutes and you know what to do, and you've got the resources, and you could turn your waiting room. And, these are going to be updated as, we're kind of working with this other group, Canadians for Homeopathy, to create a bigger network. So we're working together because we both have the same goal of protecting your access to homeopathic doctors. And if you're a homeopathic doctor, to be able to protect your practice and be able to help people like you've been trained to do. So, yeah. Victor, we've kind of been dominating. Did you want to jump in and say anything, and then we'll go to questions?
Well, no, I think we live in very critical times, and homeopathy is not going to go away. Yeah, it's been attacked before. There is, has been mentioned, a very strong impulse to try and eradicate homeopathy, but homeopathy is rooted in the truth. And anything that's rooted in the truth can never be destroyed. The law of similars, on which homeopathic medicine is based, is a universal law of healing. Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathic medicine, elaborated this law in a way that had never been done before, and revolutionized medicine. Again, freed it from the constraints of scientific literalism and materialism. And in my opinion, homeopathy is actually the medicine of a future science. And this is part of the limitation that we come up against as homeopaths when we're asked to prove the legitimacy of our medicine. It's because homeopathy and the principles on which homeopathy works are not fully understood. Because it's a phenomena that our scientific paradigm actually isn't adequate to fully understand. And so homeopathy is not only about medicine, but it's actually about the evolution of human knowledge and human awareness. And so, you know, we're at the precipice of the crisis of scientific literalism and scientific materialism. And homeopathy is important not only because it's a very deep acting and profound system of medicine, but because actually when you explore it deeply enough, you will be forced to question the underlying fundamental premises of scientific materialism. And homeopathy actually gives us resources, very sophisticated resources, to understand the natural world in new ways that will help not only to advance medicine, but to advance actually our whole understanding of the system of nature.
I think on many fronts we're kind of facing a change, and I'm really optimistic. Like as odd as this might sound to people, because like tomorrow I'm on my Substack, doing a piece on Bill C-34, which is really going to usher in the censorship control grid. Like it truly is, the George Orwell Ministry of Truth, and where we're going to lose right now. People are on the internet watching us, and we can log into the internet without having to verify who we are. We have this freedom. That freedom is going to be taken away, where you're going to have to verify your identity. You're basically going to have to get the government's permission to access the internet. Wow, that's going to be a pretty significant change. Like, think about that. Right now, you can freely access the internet. You can freely access social media channels. But in a short period of time, if this bill is allowed to pass, you will not be able to freely access the internet. You're going to have to verify who you are. Well, that's going to require a central database, because, right now, most of us have encountered when I had to verify my identity to get back on the CRA site, I had to take a photo of my driver's license that it uploaded, and then a photo of myself that it uploaded, and it would have had its AI computers comparing the two, and that's the guy. So they could verify through that government ID who I am and my age. Well, people aren't going to put up with that type of onerous thing every time they want to get on the internet. So we've got iris scanner and thumb scanner coming, where it's linking you to a central database, and now we're in digital ID, so that it's convenient, but we still have to get government permission to access, and everything is being super censored on a whole number of criteria, and now we're afraid to speak our minds so that people don't know what we think, and we're separated. And then you're in a full-blown police state before you know it. But the point I was trying to make, and I'm trying to actually be optimistic, is it seems that right now everything's accelerating. So here we are on the natural health remedy front and homeopathic medicine, but we could just go after list after list after list. And in a way, it's a wonderful thing, because people are feeling the pressure. And I just have a feeling that this thing's just going to flip. People are just going to say enough. We want government that's acting for us, not against us. And we want to have, self-determination, and we want to be free to do things without having to jump through government hoops. And I think for the first time in my life, like, I thought I'd lived my whole life with Health Canada trying to get rid of these and perhaps succeeding. And I actually think that we could see, health freedom. So it's pretty exciting.
I think we're definitely seeing an increase in people studying homeopathy, using homeopathy. I mean, that in the last 6 years, that's really increased. And so I'm optimistic too, Shawn. I think you're right that, we could see things turn around if people get mobilized.
Mm-hmm. So get mobilized, people.
Ultimately, I think it has to be about public choice. So I think that's the most important consideration. You need to be able to choose what kind of health system you want and what, which practitioners you can access. And I think in Ontario, certainly homeopaths should be easy to choose. They practice safely and they have access to remedies, and we must make sure that continues.
Mm-hmm. So, Jason, were there any questions out there? Because this would be a good time if there were, for us to answer some questions. Or, have we once again been so clear?
So yes, of course we do. We have questions and comments worth looking at. One for Basil that came out quickly. Why does your college not recognize RMDY Academy out of Australia? Their course is robust and they are doing amazing work.
I don't know who they are, but we have a system of our regulations in Ontario require us to create standards and guidelines, and we follow the legislation. It's for Ontario, really. I don't know who these people are in
Right.
Australia.
Okay. So this is probably for another format. Thank you for the question, but it's outside of the scope of today's show. Super asks, by what mechanism do homeopathic remedies affect healing if they are that dilute?
Good question.
By what?
Well,
mechanism?
They're not just dilute. There's two processes involved with making homeopathic medicines: dilution and succussion. So Victor, you can say more, but just that it's not just dilution.
Yeah, and the mechanism, there are, like I said, homeopathy is the medicine of a future science. There are emerging theories as to the understanding of how ultra-high dilutions actually have direct physiological changes. The science is in its infancy. We're still in the discovery phase in many aspects of truly understanding what ultra-high dilutions are and how they work. That doesn't mean that they don't work. There are many natural phenomena that we don't fully understand, like gravity or like electricity. Doesn't mean we don't know how to utilize these things. So there are a lot of cutting-edge researchers that are investigating these questions. And if you are curious to dive into some of the research, the Canadian Coalition for Homeopathy, of which all three of us on this call today are members, have produced a series of research webinars that cover many diverse topics and showcase researchers from all around the world. And that research webinar series will continue. So the exact mechanisms cannot be precisely delineated and at this time and are not universally agreed upon. But there is a lot of very exciting and very sophisticated and advanced scientific work that is being done. So you can head over to the coalition website, Canadian Coalition for Homeopathy, and you will be able to find many, many research webinars that will explore the answer to your question. But it's not clear cut, and there's still a lot to be discovered, and it's actually a very, very exciting field.
Victor, do you want to just talk about provings?
Sure. Yeah. So we have the history of homeopathy is full of drug provings, and so homeopathic proving is usually a double-blind, sometimes placebo-controlled trial of a medicine. And the basic idea is that a remedy that is produced in the form of an ultra-high dilution, and it could be a plant remedy, it could be a mineral substance, it could be a substance derived from any number of different materials that are found in the natural world. And when the remedy is produced, it is then administered to a group of volunteers who are then very closely supervised by the provers, the master provers who are undertaking the drug experiment, the drug testing. And the remedy is administered to the point at which the volunteer then starts to exhibit certain symptoms. And these symptoms could be on the level of physical changes that start to emerge, could be changes on the level of disposition, mood, could be certain dreams that start to emerge, certain events that happen in outer experience in the person's life. And then at the end of the proving, everybody gets together and all of these experiences are collated. And so, for example, if you have, say, a proving group of 15 people, and out of those 15 people, half of them experienced right-sided headaches when a thunderstorm was approaching, then that becomes relevant data that is then carefully noted down and then becomes relevant in terms of understanding part of the way in which this medicine can be prescribed if a patient comes into a practice and they complain, for example, of right-sided headaches at the approach of a thunderstorm. Now, that in and of itself is not sufficient to prescribe a remedy, but if we see, for example, alongside of this right-sided headache at the approach of a thunderstorm, dreams of floods, for example, and that is also something that, say, 40 or 50% of all of the provers experienced. And you then develop a rudimentary picture of what this substance can do to healthy subjects. And when then you see those symptoms emerging on the level of both mind and body in a patient who comes in for homeopathic treatment, these symptoms are precisely matched from the proving to the report of the patient that is seeking healing. So we have a very sophisticated way of testing or proving homeopathic remedies. And homeopathic remedies are prescribed in a very highly individualized fashion. So we're not just giving remedies at random, we're differentiating between many thousands of remedies. And we have to rely on very precise and very accurate details in order to be able to stimulate what in homeopathy is called the vital force, which is, you could call it equivalent to the psychoneuroendocrine immune axis, if we want to use contemporary scientific language. And the psychoneuroendocrine immune axis is arguably equivalent to what Hahnemann and his contemporaries were calling the vital force. It is that invisible governing principle that oversees feeling, function, and sensation on all levels of experience. It's also, the psychoneuroendocrine immune axis is also that mechanism by which external phenomena are internalized, and the ways in which we react to and respond in our individual ways to certain events or situations or stresses that come in from the outside are determined by the ways in which our psychoneuroendocrine immune axis is functioning inside of ourselves. And it's tuned to the individual frequency pattern of each person. And so a homeopathic remedy, in order to effect a change, that is to say, to balance the vital force or to balance the psychoneuroendocrine immune axis, has to precisely resonate with the pattern of imbalance that the patient is experiencing. And when you can find that very precise match, then the entire resonance pattern inside of the organism begins to shift into a state of equilibrium or harmony. And that is the fundamental basis of homeopathy. It's finding a similar pattern that is inherent in some substance that is taken from outer nature, whose drug picture very closely corresponds to the inner state of imbalance that is found inside of a sick person.
Fascinating.
And this information also would be captured in Materia Medica. So case histories over the last 100 years or even longer would be recorded into Materia Medica. The provings would be recorded in Materia Medica, and in recent times, of course, all of this information is computerized, and so homeopaths very often will have access to this information on millions of cases, millions of different patient complaints. All of this is recorded and at the fingertips of homeopaths who have these programs to help them in the work that they do in identifying remedies that are appropriate to particular patients and their illness and their illnesses.
And Materia Medica is a database for collecting symptoms and solutions and evidence?
Materia medica just means medical materials. So it's basically a detailed drug picture that's written up based on proving information, but then afterwards, subsequent cured cases that are then added to our understanding of what this homeopathic medicine can treat, why it would be prescribed. And so that includes physical symptoms, that includes dreams that are associated with certain remedies, that includes dispositional states of the patient. All of these details are very meticulously and very carefully noted down. And every remedy has many, many, many different associations on all levels of experience that are associated. And so homeopaths are very careful in prescribing remedies and very precise in terms of noting down what remedies do, how remedies will alter feeling, function, and sensation, and then how that information is utilized and prescribed to patients depends on very lengthy intakes. For myself, I take at least 2 hours for an initial consultation because I find that's what's required to be able to begin to understand what's actually going on in a person's experience. So we take homeopathy very seriously, and it needs to be taken very seriously because it's a very precise and very highly refined science. Now, at the same time, there are homeopathic remedies that can be used by home prescribers, as Liz has mentioned. And my own experience, my own introduction to homeopathy came precisely through such an experience. I had a very bad case of poison ivy. At the time I was a practicing herbalist, I tried dozens of herbs to try and keep this rash at bay. Nothing helped. I knew a little bit about homeopathy, and so I went to a pharmacy and I got a little bottle of Rus Tox, which is homeopathically potentized poison ivy. And I took a few drops of that remedy, and within 5 minutes, the itching had subsided by about 80%. And then over the next 2 days, the rash had completely disappeared. So it can be as simple as that. It can be very, very simple. And there are many good resources also for understanding how to use homeopathic remedies in acute illnesses. And there's a long history of this as well. And it could be so, as my example illustrates, very simple and very straightforward. But then when it comes to dealing with complex chronic diseases, it does require much more sophisticated analysis. But homeopathy is available for everybody to explore.
Amazing. Hardly the kind of like ragtag group of hippies just making it up as they go along that perhaps many people would like to categorize homeopathy as. We've got to move on. We do have questions in queue. Perhaps not quite questions, but a series of interesting comments here. Dealing with outrage from the threat to homeopathy. Luella says, but hard drugs and street drugs are legal with safe injection sites. I'm a nutritionist. I've been very frustrated with the fact that I have to go to the US to get supplements that have been banned here in Canada. And in my opinion, homeopaths are healers, doctors are prescribers. If anyone has a comment on any of that, go ahead.
I liked the safe injection site one. Maybe we need to have safe homeopathic practice site. With where you can have homeopathic remedies mailed there from the States, and people are free to go and access them. It's crazy, isn't it? They are pushing people with chronic illness to maid themselves. Mm-hmm. And in fact, it's been reported it's now our third leading cause of death, but it's underreported. So like in Ontario, the College of Physicians and Surgeons have banned doctors from recording MAID as a cause of death. It's no longer on the death certificate, but on the other thing, you can't write in MAID or you're committing professional malpractice. So, we're deliberately hiding the number of people that are being encouraged to have themselves killed. But those people that, okay, we can't solve your problem, you're suffering, so we'll put you to death, but don't you dare import a natural remedy that a trained naturopathic doctor has prescribed for you that we all agree is perfectly safe. Don't try that. Let's take that chemical that paralyzes you. We don't know if you're still conscious or not, and then give you the other chemical where you slowly drown. Whether you're experiencing it or not, we don't know. You can do that, but don't you dare take a homeopathic remedy to see if that works for you. Is this insanity, or am I missing something?
It is insanity.
Yeah, and it touches on the other point between, what actually is the nature of healing, and homeopathy offers a unique perspective on healing. Even when we look at the difference between how a homeopathic remedy is administered versus a pharmaceutical drug, and so homeopathy, prides itself on the minimum dose. Yeah, so we don't endlessly repeat remedies. We give a remedy to initiate a self-healing response. Yeah, we give a remedy so that the body, so the organism on all levels is able to adjust the way that it's functioning and come into a healthy, balanced state. And a true healing, in my understanding, is one that does not require continual use over and over and over and over and over and over again of a drug. Because if you have to use something over and over and over and over and over and over again, then a healing isn't taking place. All you're doing is either managing symptoms or suppressing symptoms.
Mm-hmm.
In homeopathy, we do the opposite. We stimulate the self-healing capacity of the organism, and that is, really what the essence of homeopathy is all about. And so that has to be emphasized. What actually is healing? It's a big question, but suppression, which leads to a further advancement of disease, is antithetical to the aims of homeopathic prescribing and homeopathic practice.
Well, and what I find interesting is people that go, well, this makes no sense to me, are just assuming that we are strictly a chemical organism. When, well, wait a second, we're as electrical as we are chemical. So now that's being totally ignored already. So everyone will agree, even medical doctors, yeah, you're electrical and you're chemical. But all of our healing, we'll never look at the electrical except for pH balance. I mean, aside from that, that's it. Well, we also know we're energetic, which is separate than I mean, this is fact. And yet, we don't attempt any healing in that area. And, for me, something works or doesn't work. And if it doesn't work, it goes away. Like, this is the interesting thing, before the NHP regulations, well, the industry was pretty actually self-limiting because it depended on consumers choosing. So what would happen is there would be a need, and somebody would go, okay, well, this could work on the need. Well, if it didn't work, it would disappear. Because if I'm buying something, off a natural practitioner or in a health food store, and it doesn't work for me, I'm not buying it again. But if it worked, oh my gosh, I am buying it again. And then other manufacturers are seen, and then there's back and forth. And all of a sudden you end up with 2 or 3 remedies that are tremendously effective. And it was self-limiting, and now the whole population is better off. Well, homeopathy is a huge practice worldwide. People have to pay for it in most jurisdictions, not all. Some it's government funded, but they access it because it works. So, we can say how, because the question, and we all understand the question because we're in a reductionist then physical model, ignoring, the electrical part and ignoring the energetic part and ignoring the emotional part, which is just as important. Like, if I can just segue into a fun story, I was interviewing a naturopathic doctor for the health show. His name will come to me, but he's just a wonderful, wonderful healer. And I was asking all the people I were interviewing that were healers, regardless if they're traditional, well, what cases impacted you the most? That doesn't even have to be a successful case, like just personally impacted you. And he was Eric Abada. He was sharing, well, there was this one time where, mother drags in this 13-year-old daughter that was just suffering terribly, with bowel issues, and it was leading to a whole bunch of other complications like huge skin rashes. She was having allergic reactions to her food. And well, naturopathic doctors like homeopathic doctors, they want to know everything that's happening in your life, to look at a holistic approach. And he says, well, I realized this was emotional. It was the dynamics between the mother and the daughter. And I'm thinking, as I'm interviewing him and he's telling this, I'm not buying what he's selling, right? Like, and so he says, you know, he basically counseled the mother to stop certain behaviors and dynamics with the daughter. Like, there were, you know, also diet changes and stuff like that, but it completely resolved very quickly. And the mother realized exactly what was going on. And I said, well, you got to explain this to me. And he says, well, the mother was putting the daughter into fight or flight. So now the digestive system isn't working, and she's having an allergic reaction to her food. Well, that made perfect sense to me. That's an emotional thing that's affecting physical. And, you know, I think our mainstream system that just looks at chemical totally misses that.
Absolutely. It totally misses that. And it totally misses the understanding that healing is not just about the elimination of physical pathology. And Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy himself, said in aphorism 9 of his Organoid of Medicine, which is, you can say, the foundational text of homeopathy, that health means that the vital force, that self-regulating, self-governing, innate healing capacity of the organism, that in a healthy state, the vital force governs in admirable, harmonious, and vital operation, both feeling and function, so that our indwelling rational spirit can freely avail itself of the healthy body for the higher purposes of our existence. Yeah, that is actually the definition of health that Hahnemann puts forward, not just the eradication or elimination of symptoms, but actually the realization and actualization of an individual's higher purpose. And that's what health is from the homeopathic perspective. And not just a person getting better physically, but being able to free themselves from the delusion that keeps them stuck in faulty patterns of functioning. And that is arguably one of the main reasons why homeopathy has always been under threat, because it is a medicine that is for human emancipation and can help people to arrive at that place in themselves.
Amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a completely different philosophy.
And I think the frustration I see in Canada is that, you know, because people have to pay out of pocket in general for homeopathic treatment, they tend to, you know, go to their conventional approach first because it's free, even though it's not really free. And, you know, so we talked, Victor mentioned suppression. You know, we see people taking a lot of medications. It's not helping. It's driving the disease in deeper. And then when they finally do decide to go to a homeopath, they're harder to treat. So it's, you know, it'd be great if homeopathy was a first line approach in Canada, so that people would start with the non-toxic, you know, potential medicine that can help them at all levels, mental, emotional, physical, versus, you know, going with what conventional medicine offers, which is just crude drugging.
Well, and
that's our goal.
Some things in conventional medicine don't make sense to me either. Like, so for instance, you know, the psychiatry is now based largely on the theory that we have chemical imbalances in our brain that then need to be addressed with chemical drugs that actually our bodies don't manufacture. So how a chemical drug is going to fix a natural imbalance in your brain. But where they totally lose me, the practice of psychiatry. So there's a chemical imbalance in our brain, but you don't test our brain chemistry. But let me just restate that and have everyone think about it. The theory of the practice of psychiatric medicine using chemical drugs is that there's a chemical imbalance in the brain that needs to be addressed with chemical drugs that are not native to your brain, but they don't actually test our brain chemistry to see what the chemical imbalance is. And I'm totally lost there. That's now we're in total woohoo land. So you're going to know what my chemical imbalance is by listening to me describe my subjective symptoms. That sounds like voodoo to me.
Well, and sadly, you know, with people with mental illness, you never see them cured. You see them on medications forever. and the medications have a lot of side effects and a lot of toxicity. So it's not a healing modality, psychiatric.
We had at our health show Professor Alan Castles, and people can go and watch his video. I mean, he was basically explaining to us the third leading cause of death in Canada are the antidepressant drugs themselves, like just that class of drugs. But I was just making another point is that, you know, people want to say, well, the practice of homeopathic medicine doesn't make sense to me. Well, the practice of psychiatry doesn't make sense to me. You have a chemical imbalance in your brain. Well, first of all, how do you fix the chemical imbalance in your brain with non-natural things? Like, surely it's probably nutrition or other things that would restore your natural balance. But how can they don't test your brain chemistry? The whole reason for us giving you chemical drugs is to fix a chemical imbalance in your brain, but we don't test to see what that imbalance is. And we don't test to see if the chemicals we're giving you addresses that imbalance. To me, that's pure voodoo. Like, that's as crazy as it can. You tell me that's like, isn't a voodoo doctor looking at chicken bones and the bottom of the bucket more scientific than the practice of psychiatry? Like, am I missing something?
No, you're not missing anything. And I think an important piece as this relates to homeopathy is that Hahnemann was actually a pioneer in psychiatry and psychology, and he was one of the first to advocate for the humane treatment of mentally ill patients. And this was before the advent of psychoanalysis. It was before the advent of what we now understand as psychiatry. And there is a history also of homeopathic psychiatric hospitals. And there was a great book written by Dr. Jerry Cantor called Sane Asylums, The Success of Homeopathy Before Psychiatry Lost Its Mind. And if anybody would like to learn about specifically homeopathy as it relates to the history of psychiatry and just how successful homeopathy was in psychiatric cases and still is, this is a great book to explore and a fascinating piece of history.
Yeah, I mean, it's a strange world. I'm very pleased that, you know, that you guys agree we're going to turn this around, because people know what works, and, you know, and they understand that the model being forced on us isn't working. So are there any other things that we should be saying to people? Like, we're encouraging them to plug in. So, you know, if you're a homeopathic doctor, plug into this network and start getting educated, and use your office as a space that can educate your patients so that they can plug in. Because at the end of the day, we're going to need to peacefully demand that we have the ability to choose to access homeopathic practitioners, that we have the ability to access natural remedies. And that is with all of us getting together. And we actually need you, because you interact with people that are philosophically oriented to wanting to protect access to you. So, like, we need you and you need us.
So I just wanted to jump in to put a button on that little conversation about the woo. I'm sure most of you are aware, in 2022, there was what was referred to as an umbrella study, kind of a meta analysis of the papers, plus follow-up to show that there was no basis to claim that mental illness was caused by chemical imbalances in the brain, specifically serotonin levels. And this was international front page, not front page, but headline news everywhere, and it just seems to have disappeared. It was shown that the whole model just doesn't work. They did follow-ups on serotonin levels after taking these drugs. No change, no cure, no nothing, no basis to make the claim in the first place. I just wanted to jump in with that because it was triggering me to remember that. That was 2022, 4 years later, and it hasn't changed the industry in any way whatsoever, which is supposed to be a facts-based, paper-based, evidence-based. Yep.
Well, but I mean, that's the whole fraud. It's like, people don't understand is that we have this drug model imposed on us, and, you know, science, it has to be scientific. We need clinical trials imposed on us as a control weapon. Science has now become a weapon used against us to force us to use patented drugs. You know, I was in, and I love telling this story because, you know, it's shocking. I usually use it for censorship, but I'm in a federal court case involving Health Canada, and they hire as a, you know, outside expert a psychiatrist that ran a business that just got psychiatric drugs through this new drug approval process, which, you know, natural remedy you'll never get through because the average cost is $1 billion. And without patent, nobody will raise the money or spend the money if they have it, because as soon as you get approved, anyone can just get approval based on your approval. And they don't have to spend that money, and you don't have a monopoly to say they can't. And you don't have like a 25-year period where no one can compete with you and you can charge whatever you want. And you don't have this government healthcare system that basically will push your products anyway and buy them and impose them on us. So anyway, I digress. So I'm cross-examining this psychiatrist. And at one point he starts complaining under oath, and there's a transcript, on how hard it is to get new antidepressants approved by Health Canada. And he goes, you know, I have to give Health Canada like two double-blind clinical trials showing that the drug works. Now I'm just going to segue. He knows, and I know, that when he says he's got to give Health Canada double-blind clinical trials, 2 that show it works, that we're meaning really short-term trials, like maybe 3 weeks long. Like the joke is that, you know, when your teenagers put on antidepressants, the psychiatrist or doctor is going to tell you, well, it won't even start working for a couple of months till we load them up. But they're not approved for a couple of months, let alone years. They're only approved for maybe 3 weeks because the clinical trials are all short-term, because they don't want the safety signals on a long-term trial, and it's harder for them to show efficacy. Well, efficacy is just they've got a sugar pill group and they've got a drug group, and they're hoping that the sugar pill group do not report subjectively feeling better as much as the drug group is. And if the subjective reporting in the chemical group is statistically, like there's this magic formula, if there's enough of a statistical separation, then we pretend it means it works. Okay, so that's what the psychiatrist is referring to when he says, I have to give Health Canada 2 double-blind clinical trials showing that the drug works. So I run 8. Now, this is a guy, all he does is this, he does this for a living. He gets hired by drug companies to run these clinical trials and get through this approval process at Health Canada. So he's complaining to me, I got to give Health Canada 2. So I run 8. I've learned I don't run 2 and then 2 and 2. I run 8 at the same time because I know I got to run 8 to get those 2. I've learned. This is how hard, he's complaining at how hard it is. So I got to run 8 to get the 2. The other 6, they could be inconclusive. They could show the sugar pill works better than the drug. They could show the drug works better than the sugar pill, but the safety signals are inconvenient. They could be a combination of those. Those 6 Health Canada doesn't see. And if the drug's approved, it's illegal for them to share those 6 with you, the consumer. Now, the researchers can publish those 6 failed trials, but they never will. I don't know if they're under contract by, you know, that they can only publish what the pharmaceutical company proves. The successful trials will get published, but the unsuccessful ones, it's a rare day that anyone will ever see them. Do you see that this is a fraud? Like, first of all, subjective reporting for 3 weeks doesn't mean it works. And running 8 to get the 2, where you even have the statistical separation and the safety signals aren't horrible, it's a fraud. The whole thing is a fraud. And yet people are concerned about the practice of homeopathic medicine.
Hoo-wee. A quick shout out to Paul Everton, who's in chat. I appreciate your courage to stand in truth. You're always welcome back on my podcast, The Truth Table. Excellent podcast. Let's stay in touch, Paul. Thank you very much.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We should get back on that. So
we'll make it happen. New question. How do the new licensing requirements affect homeopathic remedies that already have a DIN number? Are they grandfathered in, or they have to all reapply with clinical trial evidence? Anyone?
Okay. I'll answer that one, and you guys can also jump in if you want. So first of all, the license requirements aren't there yet. And although they would have been drafted as early as 2017, Health Canada refuses to give anyone a copy of the draft so that there can be public comment. But they have, and we have in our discussion papers photos of their slides that they will no longer share with the public. But they've been adamant that there hasn't been changes. They want full harmonization. And that means that, if a chemical drug has to go through, 2 double-blind clinical trials, at least Health Canada has to see 2 sizable double-blind clinical trials. And if there has to be animal, life, death, 50-50 studies and stability studies and all of this billion-dollar process, if the chemical drug company has to do that to get approved, then so do you, homeopathic remedy. Now, remember, we're only talking about self-care framework or self-care products. So for conditions that are self-limiting for 60 days and for which you wouldn't have to seek the advice of a homeopathic doctor, that's what this new framework is going to allow to be licensed. So you have to go through the process that homeopathic remedies can't go through to get licensed. It's going to be the extinction of natural practitioners, not just homeopathic doctors. But that's the purpose. Health Canada doesn't want us to have any access to medical practitioners except allopathic chemical doctors that cut us and give us chemical drugs. And I'm not knocking them. I get in a car accident, I want to go to the allopathic doctor and have them keep me alive and stitch me up and put my bones in place. I want that. They shine in, acute crisis medicine. But they suck in chronic illness, and they suck in keeping us healthy, and they suck in identifying nutritional deficiencies that can be easily treated with nutrition. And they suck in toxic overload, identifying it. We need integrative medicine. They're captured also because they've got this limited scope of practice, and if they step out of it, they're disciplined and slapped. And they go into medicine wanting to help people, and many of them get frustrated, and they're doing the best they can with the tools they have. We really need integrative practice, and we need everyone freed. So there we go. If the self-care framework is allowed to come in, it's the end of most of our natural practice. And what will happen is it'll go underground because people, it's life and death, and people are but many people will die and many people will suffer because it will be truncated.
Anyone else have anything to say on that? Or we move on to another question? We'll move on. What advice do you have for someone in BC considering becoming a practitioner? Considering we are not regulated here, but the government is working on taking this all away for us. Should I still take it? Let's hear from a practitioner. What do you think?
If you are extremely passionate about your work and whatever discipline you would like to pursue, then you should pursue it, because people will seek out your expertise and your help if you are passionate and if you are sincere about what you do. If your heart is in the right place and you are genuinely concerned with helping the sick, and you devote yourself sincerely to your work, then you will succeed and people will thank you for what you do.
Amazing. I can't agree more with that. I know myself. I decided I was going to learn how to make videos a couple decades ago, and it's brought me, I was on my own. There was no clients, and now I'm at the point where I can't keep up with the work that's being thrown at me. even though I was swimming upstream supporting causes that are not popular. So, well said.
And it's not necessarily an easy path.
Yeah.
So, we are put to the test because there are many factors that are against us. But ultimately, your sincerity and dedication are what's most important in terms of success and establishing a practice and helping people that are in need.
So well said.
If I can phrase it a different way, if it's your destiny to be a homeopathic doctor, you will not be happy doing anything but being a homeopathic doctor.
So well said. We had Rowena Bug. Are there homeopathic manufacturers looking at how to obtain or in the process of obtaining this clinical trial evidence for the remedies to be regulatory compliant?
I don't know if any of us can answer that because a lot of the main manufacturers are not in Canada.
Yeah, and while there are manufacturers that are in Canada, the way that homeopathic medicines work is distinctly different than even herbs, because homeopathic remedies are prescribed for a totality of symptoms for an individual person. We don't prescribe remedy X for disease Y. Homeopathic remedies do not work like that.
Which rules out a clinical trial on disease X.
Yeah.
Well, in a way, the provings are kind of like the clinical trial, and then the historical data, the profile of the remedy used to treat a patient becomes incorporated into the materia medica, and that is the information that homeopaths can access.
Well, and I object to the question itself because it implies that the clinical trial process that the regulatory bodies like Health Canada set up are anything but a complete sham. I mean, entire books are written. I like, Angie, I think it's Angie or Marcia Angel, who is the lead editor of the New England Journal of Medicine, wrote a book, I think, called Doctors, A Story of Corruption or something like that. And so and she's a medical doctor. Okay, so she's a medical doctor, and I think she's been an editor and the lead editor at the New England Journal of Medicine, like for decades and decades. And she writes this book, and part of it, you can read the New York Book Review where, she summarizes and she says, I come to this conclusion reluctantly and slowly as an editor at the New England Journal of Medicine. But she says it's simply impossible to believe most of the published research and the medical guidelines based on the clinical research. So here we have a medical doctor who is a world expert because journal editors, it's what they do is evaluate clinical research. And she's saying it's all bullshit. You can't believe it. So the question implies that this system that we've been fed, where we're told it's the gold standard, it's become so corrupted because you can just design trials and to try and get whatever you want, right down to, the psychiatric trials, maybe 3 weeks. And they try to design, like the whole thing's gamed. If there's a way to fix this drug approval process for chemical drugs, is you don't let the drug companies run the clinical trials. So they basically will have to come to the regulatory body and say, we want 2 clinical trials run because you're going to require that. And then the regulatory body hires an outside expert to design a fair study design, which is then published for public comment. And then, people that are unknown, groups that are unknown are hired to run the 2 clinical trials. And all of the data, every shred of it is public. And if those 2 clinical trials run on this published and open study design, by groups that cannot by law be connected to the pharmaceutical companies, if it shows the drug works, great. But I bet you not a single drug on the market today would be approved if we went that way. So, it's the whole problem because the question, and I'm not trying to single out, but we've been so conditioned to, it has to be clinical evidence. when that is a leading cause of our death, is this whole system. You know, I followed up with Alan Castles after the health show because I was shocked. Like, I knew that 2 of the 5 leading causes of death are connected to the chemical drugs. And I knew that from Professor Ron Law's work from New Zealand. But it had been a long time since I'd looked at that. And here I got Professor Alan Castles sharing, well, the 3rd leading cause of death alone is just the antidepressants. So I followed up with him after the health show. And he directed me to Professor Goetz at the University of Copenhagen, who is publishing quite convincingly. And he's very open on his sites and what he relies on to basically argue that the leading cause of death in all Western nations are the chemical drugs. So yes, the 3rd leading cause of death is a subset, but the leading cause of death, well, these chemical drugs are approved based on the clinical trial evidence. And they're not effective, and there are leading causes of our death. So why are we even having this conversation? Wouldn't we like, I mean, I don't know. It's just, but I feel like we're trying to defend homeopathic medicine. Or the question could also be the same about, you know, naturopathic doctors that rely more on herbal remedies. Like, so what, we can only have them if we have to go through the same clinical evidence? Well, then we won't have them at all, which is the goal. And then that whole game is broken anyway. So sure, give us intellectual property rights, and then we'll have those trials, and there'll be nosebleed. And then the whole thing will be misleading anyway, because then it all becomes about money. Like,
well, and Shawn, I think the Charter of Health Freedom is so vitally important in this, because we can't keep putting homeopathic medicines in and regulating them in the same way as conventional drugs. They're not any way at all similar. And so, you know, to create something new where they're actually regulated by, you know, overseen by bureaucracy that actually understands what they are and doesn't demand ridiculous regulatory hoops to jump through because of their known safety record of over 200 years of use.
Yeah, well, and then also having to do a balanced risk analysis, because the problem is the fallacy is, well, we need strict regulations to protect us, but the harm profile is so low that you can't even measure if you're helping at all. But there's a huge danger to taking it away. Like, that's the problem. That's what I had to realize is I was acting for Health Canada as a lawyer against a herbalist named Jim Strauss. So Jim was suing Health Canada because Health Canada seized some herbs he was importing from the US. They were perfectly legal for him to import, but Health Canada was trying to shut him down. And I will share that Health Canada waived solicitor-client privilege so I can talk about what they told me and why they were doing this. So they described him as a rogue herbalist, and it was dangerous. He was selling an unapproved treatment. Well, I mean, this is back in 1994. I didn't know any of this. I actually thought, so, you know, well, first of all, in my defense, the Kool-Aid, it was hot and it tasted pretty good. It was very refreshing to drink the Kool-Aid. But well, when you don't know, we've got this rogue herbalist who is selling unapproved treatments. I mean, that itself sounds dangerous, doesn't it? Unapproved treatments. Well, he's claiming to cure heart disease. And if people then delay the approved treatments, surgery, and dangerous chemicals, then they could die. They could have a heart attack and die. They could have a heart attack and their heart's damaged and now they're disabled. Like, oh, isn't scary? Sky is falling. Run. We better stop this. So I go to court and have his case thrown out of court, and he's in the wrong court. And then I start my own law practice. And he's in another effort to get him shut down. They get him, the College of Physicians and Surgeons in BC, to charge him with practicing medicine. Because remember, It's only legal for medical doctors to practice medicine, and the practice of medicine includes making treatment claims. And he's claiming to cure heart disease. He drove around in a white van with red letters, "We cure heart disease." He's practicing medicine. He's dead in the water on the law. And so I'm attacking the law. It's like we had freedom of expression. This is like 1996, maybe 97. The charter's only like 15 years old. It came in 1982. It's still, judges still actually, things like freedom of expression meant something back then. So every single case I could find said that the judge should strike down this law as violating freedom of expression. But I had a narrative problem. So you put yourself in the judge's shoes, both you guys on the panel and you, the audience. You're the judge, and every case says you should strike this law down, but you accept Health Canada's narrative that this is a rogue herbalist and people could actually die if he's allowed to speak, because they could put off getting a heart attack. You know, they could have a heart attack putting off the proper treatment, and they could die or they could be disabled. You're going to do everything you can to rule against me, even though the law says that you should strike down that law. It's just human nature. You don't want anyone being hurt. The problem is Health Canada's assuming it doesn't work. Well, I've got this narrative problem. So I go to his office, like Natural Way Herbs. It was a little herb shop. It was one of those herb shops that, you know, just stunk of herbs. Like after you were there half an hour, your clothes smelled of his shop. Like it was a mom and pop little herb shop. And I go there and I explain the narrative problem. I say, Jim, like, I know we don't have any clinical evidence, right? That awful word that I've come to detest because it's a trap. Is there any way we can show you're telling the truth? Like, you'll take the stand and I'll tell you his story. So he's an older guy. He flew for the German Air Force in the Second World War. He's from Austria. His family were traditional healers for 400 years. And he was trained by his grandparents, you know, grabbed by the ear and dragged out into the forest, picking herbs, tasting herbs, learning what they're for, learning the combinations. Like, he was a master herbalist just because of the family he grew up in. We could care less about that. He gets a PhD in electrical engineering. He's working for BC Hydro, high stress job. He has the heart attack. He's rushed by ambulance to the hospital. They do the angiogram. He's got 100% blockage and 180% blockage. I've seen the angiogram. And they say, Jim, you need a double bypass or you're going to die. Well, wait a second. He had a different idea. He didn't like that. I don't know if it's the skill saw or when they break your ribs opening. I don't know what his objection was, but he checks himself out of the hospital and comes up with his heart drops, cures himself, lives another 30 years without a bypass, dies of old age. And now I got to share this with the world. So he'd take the stand, but the judge will see that as self-serving. So, Jim, is there any other way we can prove you're telling the truth? He just goes in the back and brings me a box. And he goes in the back and he brings me another box. And he goes in the back and he brings me another box. I don't know if there were 5 boxes now, like that was 30 years ago, but there was at least 3, and they're all filled with letters. And I take them to my office, and I don't know, do I have 10,000 letters? Do I have 30,000 letters? Like, we're talking tens of thousands. And they're all the same. I had heart disease. I was sick. I was dying. I took your heart drops. I got well. God bless you. Pure hearsay. I can't enter a single letter, but I can call the authors of the letters. So I start phoning people. On the day of trial, I had 5 middle-class professionals that I cherry-picked because the judge is a middle-class professional. They had all had heart disease. They had all had at least 1 open heart bypass surgery. One of them had had 2. They had all continued to have heart disease because the reason they were being plugged up wasn't being addressed. They all needed, according to the mainstream medical system, they all needed another bypass surgery. A couple were too sick to survive the surgery, so they were just sent home to die. The others weren't willing to go through that traumatic event again, traumatic physically, energetically, and spiritually again, just to buy a couple more years. So, so the medical system's a dead end. They all come across these heart drops, usually through naturopathic doctors. They all get well. Here's the thing that converted me. They were all working full-time at trial. They had been disabled, many of them, for decades. They're all working full-time at trial. And I had to come to realize the danger wasn't removing the product or leaving the product on the market. The danger was removing the product from the market. There will never be double-blind clinical trials on that product because you can't patent it. But when the mainstream medical system that will happily made you, because you're suffering from heart disease, so will happily put you to death, will happily cut you open unless it's going to kill you, will happily put you on chemical drugs, including, rat poison. But don't you dare take a herbal remedy. No chance. And don't you dare take a homeopathic remedy. No way. Not
what are we doing? What are we doing? We do have a couple more questions and comments.
So we'll take a couple of more and then we'll pack her in.
You bet. Yeah. Do any countries in the world currently have homeopathy as a frontline defense, either as totally legit or even covered by perhaps state insurance or other insurance?
So India has a very robust medical system for homeopathy. There are homeopathic hospitals, homeopathic medical colleges. It's one of the leading countries in the world. France used to have homeopathy covered. Unfortunately, about, 8 years ago, something like that, the French government stopped covering it. Same in Britain. So, we do see some countries where homeopathy is very much available.
Switzerland.
Okay, yes, Switzerland. That's right.
If I may jump in quickly, did you say France used to have it covered?
Yes.
And the UK used to have it covered?
That's correct. Yes.
By what mechanism did that become uncovered? Was it similar to Canada where
Political.
legislation was snuck in?
Yeah, it was political.
Wow.
And very, very disappointing to see that, because Britain did have several homeopathic hospitals. I mean, they still are functioning in some capacity, but not to the level that they were.
So I have a comment. I come back to my regulatory model, and I say that notwithstanding, I think that public protection has to be foremost. And if the remedies are safe, that's great. We still need to ensure that homeopaths are well trained, competent, ethical, and I think the regulatory model fits that best. And I think that would safeguard Health Canada in their concerns about risk. So I think the regulatory model would suffice.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. And people don't understand there's a different jurisdiction. So the provinces regulate medical professionals like medical doctors and homeopathic doctors. And the federal government, the drug regulation is actually the exercise of their criminal law power. So, which is kind of interesting. So we would all agree, cocaine or heroin or thalidomide or Vioxx, like things that are dangerous. Well, maybe, you have the right under criminal law to regulate that. But, when we're talking about homeopathic remedies that, you couldn't kill anyone if you tried. And when we're talking about vital nutrients that you actually need to survive, I think it is criminal that Health Canada stepped in, but not that they have jurisdiction under the criminal law to do so. And your point, Basil, is the provinces just ensuring that the homeopathic doctors are, trained and ethical. That's safety enough because there's no risk to the products.
Yeah, exactly the point. And, I think that Ontario has a model, example of how homeopathy can work in the public interest.
providing you're the registrar. Yeah, we need lots of Basils everywhere, and then we can go ahead with that model. And I think Basil's argument is generally that we have to prove no one's in danger perhaps because of the hysteria that's built up around natural remedies. That first prove it, there's no danger before we go and get into the next step of things. Otherwise, the accusations will be slung that it is dangerous, right?
I think the biggest danger has to do with ethics, because the product is not dangerous. It's then just a question: are the homeopaths well trained? Do they have clinical experience? Are the schools approved? You know, this is the crux of the matter. If you have well trained, ethical, competent professionals, then there is no danger, and the college is there to ensure that is the mode of practice.
And I assume that we're in the same zone as natural health products, where we don't have any deaths or any grave harms to anyone ever in the history of anything coming to anyone who's taken a homeopathic product.
They're so below, like, so in risk analysis, there's what's called the ultra safe level or de minimis level, which is if something causes no more than 1 death per million of the population per year, it's considered ultra safe or de minimis. And that's so safe that if you brought in regulations and restricted and stuff like that, the safety signal is so low, you can't tell whether you're making a difference. So why would you even think of regulating? You can't make a difference. Well, natural health products, including homeopathic remedies, are 14 times safer than lightning. So so Canadians don't get killed by natural health products, but some of us actually get killed by lightning each year. The money would be better spent putting up lightning rods, but we all know the risk of getting killed by lightning is so small that why would we try to bring in a regulatory scheme to regulate lightning? Well, we wouldn't, because we're not going to make any difference. Putting lightning poles up all across Canada are not actually going to save some of us are still going to die by lightning strikes, and the safety signal is still so low that we couldn't measure whether we're making any difference anyway. And we are like 14 times safer than lightning. The whole industry, which like times, it's like it. Why are we even having this discussion? You know, peanut butter is so geometrically more dangerous than the entire natural product industry, because Canadians die each year from peanut butter. And some of our most vulnerable, like kids. But we don't ban peanut butter, and we don't regulate peanut butter out of existence. The whole thing's a fraud. It's a fraud to protect the chemical drug industry and intellectual property rights. You know, another point that Professor Alan Castles made is that the whole drug model is there not to get help to protect health. It's to protect intellectual property rights. And I love the guy, because I was saying the same thing about 15 years ago. We were saying it independent of each other. It takes you a long time in the model before you realize it has nothing to do with health, because all the language is health. It's there to protect intellectual property rights. And once you see it, it's clear. So we're in a trap, and we need to get out. And you guys are part of it. And we need to get naturopathic doctors on side. I'm going to end the show just because we have been 2 hours, and you guys didn't know it was going to be this long and all of that. So, but anyway, I truly thank the three of you for, coming on the show. I thank you for the work you're doing. We're going to continue to work together. They're partnering with the NHPPA to see if we can build a big coalition. Naturopathic or homeopathic doctors, please get involved. And clients, patients of homeopathic doctors, get them involved. So share this link with them, and, get them plugged in to these two groups. So on that happy note, I thank everyone for coming and attending. This is the beginning. So this is our first effort to try and bring awareness to this and call out for homeopathic doctors to plug in with us. And for the patients of homeopathic doctors. And Basil, I can't not call them what they truly are. So
Thank you so much,
Basil's
Shawn.
not Basil. So province of Ontario, Basil's not stepping out of line. It's me, but I'm not in Ontario, so come and get me. But it's just an honor to be working with you guys, and I thank you and look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you so much.